3 races into the 2026 Formula One season, and you'd think we'd have a few more answers than we do questions at this point, especially coming from preseason testing where there's so much misleading and sandbagging, if you will, that you're only left with questions after that. But with 2 races eliminated from the calendar and 3 races in the books, other than Mercedes' dominance really to this point, we're only left with questions heading into Miami. Do we have a hierarchy being established here? Is there a competitive order to the grid that's starting to solidify?
There's a clear competitive order. Whether it's starting to solidify, this break we're going into really throws a wrench into. It could have been a lot clearer if we had these 2 races still on the calendar, but I'm happy to have some uncertainty coming our way. And the Mercedes dominance that seems like a pretty clear-cut picture could be an illusion. Their success so far seems to be based on technical prowess, but it's also definitely come from successful execution. They've got the best understanding of these new regulations, and whether their early dominance has been based more on that higher level of understanding or a technical advantage, we don't know until some other teams develop.
From what I can tell, it's pretty clear that their power unit is definitely the best. You see Alpine making a resurgence into the midfield. McLaren, when they're running and operating, they're looking very strong. Mercedes obviously dominating. Really, it's just Williams really toting at the back of the field, overweight and slow. Across the board, if you exclude Williams at this point, the Mercedes power unit seems to be the dominating piece. And interestingly, the Ferrari power unit is also looking good.
Yeah, the Ferrari power unit looks great. The Mercedes power unit looks excellent. And with those other teams catching up in the understanding of how to operate it, I'm curious to see how much Mercedes benefit from that early understanding will wane and how much of it they'll be able to retain. I think that'll shed some light on how much of their advantage is operational versus technical.
Right now, we're operating in a window where we're thinking everybody's going to be making upgrades. And this is going to be an opportunity for the midfield to shake up between themselves. But the reality is Mercedes, like you said, has established that they have the best understanding of this technical reg set at this point. I think them having the opportunity for upgrades is equally as advantageous as everybody else. I don't think we're going to see Mercedes edge wane, but I do think that the midfield is going to, coming out of Miami, establish a little bit more of that solidified order, because to this point, everybody kind of understands what their upgrade paths are going to be. This gives them an opportunity with the cost cap to eliminate costs from 2 races and accelerate their upgrade paths. So I think what's going to happen in Miami is there's going to be a lot of upgrades brought, and we're going to get a very clear picture of where all these teams were heading. And that shakeup is probably going to determine what the grid's going to look like and also what future upgrades are going to look like. Because some people are going to hit it, some teams are going to hit it, some teams are going to fall on their face.
And I think part of that is going to be how drivers adjust to the changes. I think teams that shake up their progression direction more over this break are going to challenge their drivers to adapt more. Teams that have that initial development strategy correct right now are going to challenge their drivers less and maybe even help their drivers through some simulator work over the break.
It's interesting you bring up the drivers, because one of the things that we talked about, and the media talked about at length, with this reg set was that driver input is going to matter a ton more in this reg set than it had in the previous. But one thing that you see throughout qualifying, throughout the races, and I'm pretty sure in Suzuka in quali, with the exception of Max far outperforming Isaac and Pierre far outperforming Franco, it was pretty much just a stack of teams going down the order. I think that's pretty indicative that the cars are still very much so the delineator in terms of where these teams are going to end up on the grid. I don't think that the stress that we got that the driver input is going to matter significantly more is showing itself just yet. Once the cars kind of compress over the next few years, I think we'll start to see that. But I don't think driver input is actually going to be as big of a factor as we'd hoped this season.
Driver input in performance might not be as much of an immediate factor, but driver input in development is going to be even bigger. and how teams are able to respond to that driver input. And the quality of that driver input is going to be critical.
Yep.
So Williams is really going to be cashing some checks, hopefully with a balance to back them up.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely going to have to see if what James is pretty confident in and has been confident in for years. He's been talking about 2026 this whole time. We're going to find out if the upgrades that they're planning on making, because he said in a recent statement, we know the areas that we need to improve and we know what to do. We'll see if he's got the cash to back, the checks that he's writing. Going back to what started this conversation here is the solidifying of the grid order at this point. I think we could probably start to say, obviously, Mercedes at the front, and in no particular order, McLaren and Ferrari as the next two. Then I think this is where it gets a little interesting this year. Red Bull's fallen off.
Red Bull's got a big development setback going, and it's looking like potentially Alpine and Haas might be leading the midfield ahead of Red Bull as we go into the middle part of this season.
Surprisingly, I think Haas so far is looking more impressive than Alpine, because to this point, Ocon and Bearman have had impressive results. Franco, outside of P10, where he couldn't get around a Williams in the last 6 laps to get P9, that's pretty much all he's got to show for it. Pierre is doing fantastic, definitely better than Ollie and Esteban, but I think just the pairing of having both of them, I think Haas is emerging as that number 4 team right now at the top of the midfield.
Yeah, they're looking so good that I wouldn't be too surprised if at some point during the season, maybe they don't finish the season that way, but I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in this season of development that their energy deployment actually surpasses Ferrari's in terms of strategic deployment.
Obviously, Ferrari's going to have an edge on understanding their own engine, but it doesn't seem like it's slowing down Haas at all. I think we have to keep Red Bull in the group with Alpine and Haas. Would you throw Audi into that mix?
Yeah, I would expect Audi and Racing Bulls to be right up in there. I wouldn't be surprised at this point if we see Racing Bulls outperform Red Bull for the first season. Their development has been fantastic, and Red Bull does not seem to understand why theirs has not been. So the Red Bull powertrains, the Red Bull Ford powertrains, is very much the Honda powertrains of old. The Honda powertrains that is working with Aston Martin now is basically a brand new company. The big difference I've noticed between the two cars is really centers around the cooling layout. The Racing Bull is really boxy. It's got room for a lot of air. The Red Bull is more streamlined and compact.
Finally, rounding out the back of the order, I think we can safely just say the bottom is Williams, Cadillac, Aston
Martin might get relegated.
Yeah, they were in danger of it in Suzuka, and it hasn't come down. Granted, there is a month to go before they could make a decision. The FIA might be reviewing stuff right now. I'm not sure, but it doesn't seem like they really solved the issues. Although, did Fernando finish the race?
Laps down, I don't know how many.
Yeah, but he finished.
Well, yeah, but he wouldn't have finished all of the laps, but he was still driving around the track when the race ended.
Yes, like that's still finishing the race even if you're lapped.
Yeah.
Because it's not a DNF.
Yeah.
So I think we got a pretty good mutual understanding of where we think we sit in terms of a competitive order. One thing that we definitely can't do an episode without talking about is the reg set. We've got 3 races now. It's not just something that we get to imagine talk about. We've got the actual time on track in a race. There's some people out there that have been pretty annoyed by it. Some people love it because of the more tight racing we got in China and Australia. And then obviously in Suzuka, you got a little bit more of the other side of it. But what are your feelings on it 3 races in?
Oh, my feelings are mixed like everyone else's. I agree with Max on some fronts, and it's hard not to agree with Lewis when he looks as happy and as quick as he does in this new car. There are definitely some changes that need to be made around the regulations and how they're going to be adjusted over the races this season. Clearly, they made a good decision reducing the harvesting capacity from 9 to 8 megajoules for Suzuka. For context, that would have potentially meant an even larger closing speed between Oliver and Franco when he had that nasty crash. I've only seen one thumbnail so far that claimed that F1 almost killed Oliver Bearman. Didn't click on it, so I don't know if it's true.
It's entirely possible when you're crashing at those speeds.
50 Gs is technically a plausible fatality.
Definitely good to have him walk away from that. And I think everybody kind of knew that this was a risk. I think Suzuka showed everything that is wrong with this reg set. You got that kind of closing speed, and it's a driver's innate reflex if he sees a driver coming in his rears
to leave as little space as the rules allow.
To move, yeah, to try to, even though you're not supposed to under braking, they're gonna do it a little bit. And it's always happened, but now with that speed difference, with the way that the harvesting and deployment works, it's just a dangerous situation. And then on top of that, when you look at Australia and China, we got some really fun racing, especially between the two Ferraris, going back and forth against each other. It seemed like real passing. But then you come to Suzuka, and it was like passing people on the freeway. It was just, like it was just so artificial. It looked like DRS times 10 on the straights.
Yeah, the pass and repass I've largely enjoyed, because even though it's artificial on the surface, there is an underlying difference in race pace. And you still have to get the move done. So we still have to see drivers leave space for each other. We have to see them know the size of the cars.
It's fun to see good wheel-to-wheel racing.
Yeah.
What this is manufacturing is just, and it's not always just a pass and repass. It's utilizing the detection point for the extra half a megajoule of deployment to try to get in front of guys. And that's a cool strategy element, I guess. Mm-hmm. But the problem with it that I see is that the passing is just that. It's just fabricated by the energy deployment. And there are, for the most part, at most tracks, clear and obvious places that you need to deploy. The deployment on the straights and in the corners, it's basically copy paste every single team. This is how they're deploying it. The one team that had issues was McLaren. And actually obviously Mercedes with George, but that was, I'm not really sure what happened there.
More of a setup issue, yeah.
For McLaren, there's auto detection built into the cars, basically like GPS, on the car is programmed to harvest and deploy in certain areas.
Yeah.
And Oscar and Lando were complaining that the way that it was set up, sometimes in like 130R, Oscar was deploying and he's like, I don't want to deploy here.
Yeah.
I want to save that for the straight, or he's just going to pass me. And that was a big issue for McLaren. But other than that, it was pretty much a mirror image across the teams of how they were deploying their energy. So I don't even know that there's a big strategy element to it. And the passing is fabricated. It's not good wheel-to-wheel racing. It's just biding your time and getting ahead and then hoping something happens where somebody misses an apex and you build a second.
Yeah, I think my oversimplified take is that Formula One can't be 50-50 ICE versus electrical power unless you eliminate the recharging restrictions entirely. Let the drivers, or the cars rather, harvest as much power as they safely can whenever and wherever the driver wants to. And let them deploy that power wherever and whenever they want to. Put the limiting factor between the driver's hands and the rubber in the road.
So, I mean, there is an inherent limit based on how big the batteries are.
Yeah.
So
the batteries are too small to hold power for a lap. So you're talking turn by turn. The battery's not big enough to hold the power. Let's just get rid of the restrictions on charging.
How does that solve the issue?
Well, it doesn't, because then it does still make it a battery contest.
Yeah.
It gives the driver more control over that, though.
I mean, they can deploy anywhere, can't they?
They can deploy anywhere. That's what the boost mode is for. The boost button is to override the programmed deployment to just...
Well, and it's extra energy than they would.
It's the full, it's the full beans.
Yeah, just like, all of it.
Yeah, that's going to be fun.
The harvesting, they can technically do that anywhere too, because it's when they're under braking, it's kinetic.
They can do it anywhere. They just are limited to how much they can do it. And I think if they were less limited on how much they could do it, then they would get less dangerous with where they're doing it.
So I think it would do the opposite.
Okay.
Because the big limitation that you get right now is that they can only generate 250 kilowatts per second, I believe it is, on the straights by doing the super clipping. Whereas in the corners, they can get 350 kilowatts per second. The numbers might not be exactly right, but it's pretty close to that. So if
because it's braking and engine power versus just engine power, because it was my understanding that those charging rates were actually limited by the rules, not the technology.
Oh, I believe it is the rules.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that if you allowed for even more harvesting on the straights so that it was basically balanced across the board, I think you'd see more super clipping and more speed differences, because that's where it would suddenly become more advantageous to do more harvesting, is at the end of the straight.
Arguably, the straights are the safer place to do it.
See, I disagree, because where are you doing it on the straight? The very end.
True. You have the visibility, but then you still have the limited reaction time.
Yeah, it's right at the very end of the straight, and it's when you're going to see people make moves
and decide where they're braking,
the line that they're taking the corner with.
Yeah.
And the driver ahead of you is unpredictable. So
hopefully,
I mean,
if they're worth their seat.
Yeah, generally it's going to be unpredictable where they're headed. I don't know what the solution is, but something's got to change.
They're going to have to be dynamic.
Yeah, they're going to have to be ready to turn quickly on these regs.
So pretty hard pivot here, but not a full change of topic. Do you think the challenges of these regs are substantial enough to lend legitimacy to the rumors we're hearing about a Max Verstappen retirement?
Definitely. Like we said in preseason, I do not believe that Max would be truly debating retirement if he were dominating the sport right now. But he's not. And the car doesn't look like it's going to be toward the front anytime soon. And the only thing that makes me think that he would want to stay is if there was a substantial enough change that Max felt, I can be a big part of bringing this team back to the top. Because I don't think he has any interest in actually driving for anybody other than Red Bull.
No, he definitely doesn't have any interest in staying in F1 outside of a Red Bull. And it's really going to come down to how flexible they get with the regs, because he's going to need to see that willingness from F1 to make the changes needed on the car side. More so, I think, than he's going to need to see progress from Red Bull. I think he's got a strong relationship with that team. The confidence is there that they can fight if the regs suit their goals. But he's got a family and
a new baby.
He doesn't love politics whatsoever. And I think the added political friction of these uncertain regs is going to push him even further away. And I think GT3 is really his new budding passion, and the absolute lack of at least main media politics that shine through from GT3, I think that's got to be appealing to him. I'm sure there are politics actually going on, but we don't hear about them the way we hear about the stuff in F1.
I think the prevailing theory on his contract is that if he's not in P2 at a certain point in the season in the driver's standings, that he has an exit clause. That's what I've heard.
He's got, as far as I know, he's got two. There's
one for the constructors as well.
Yeah, there's one for P2 at the season break. So halfway through the season, if he's not in P2, he's got an exit clause. I'm pretty sure that one's more or less confirmed. The one for the team position in the Constructors' Championship is, I believe, lower and sooner.
Okay.
So he may actually be able to trigger that one first.
Right.
Either way, it seems pretty likely that he's got a way out this year if he wants it.
It's funny because if you had asked me at the beginning, I think you did ask me at the beginning of the season if I thought Max was going anywhere, I would have been, I did have some concern, because for the first time ever it was Max saying these things rather than us speculating about it. But now Max is saying these things and hinting that he might not want to do this. And it's wild too, because he's 28 years old?
28.
But he started when he was 17. So his 28 is Lewis's 35 or something, So he's had a long career to this point. I'm pretty sure Nico is the second or third oldest on the grid right now.
Yep.
And he's had an incredibly long career. So
No, and Nico, you bring up a good point there. Is a successful driver, a successful older driver who stepped away and took a break from the sport. Granted, Nico was less by choice than, say, Fernando.
Fernando didn't really necessarily say it was a retirement either. It was more a sabbatical, right?
He was very careful not to call it a retirement.
Yeah. Who's the guy? Is it Hakkinen?
Mika Hakkinen, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he still hasn't retired.
Yeah, he's technically on sabbatical right now.
I love that. I love that you know about that.
Dude, I got way too deep into this sport way too soon. Yeah, but no, I mean, to wrap it up, yeah, no, I do. I actually think that Max is going to take a sabbatical after this season until the regs change, which is super egg on the face of the FIA that the most in-demand driver on the planet is going to walk away. And because the sport, he doesn't like it.
I mean, they whiffed.
They whiffed.
I mean,
Bad.
I get that they've had this on the table for a while, and it's a bummer that this reg set seems to be getting compressed by the prolongation of the new word, by the way, the prolongation of the
Is that a real word?
previous reg set. I don't know.
I like it. Prolongation.
But this last reg set that was supposed to end allegedly in 2024 and then didn't end until after 2025. Yeah, I think that might have smushed this one up a little bit. And you want that to translate to teams being more prepared for this reg set. But it seems like they're just going to have to smush this one down and move on to the next one if they want to keep the drivers happy.
Yeah, and it's hard for teams to really be prepared for a regs change like this, I think, because if it was an aerodynamic change, sure. But when it's the largest engine overhaul in F1 history, it's hard to be prepared in that situation.
The next reg change that we're looking at is going to be, again, the largest engine overhaul, at least if things go the way rumors are pointing to back towards full internal combustion on biofuels.
God, I hope so. Well, and that's what they should do.
Yeah.
They should go to, like, I get the whole idea of, using the batteries because, hybrids and saving the world.
You want to be road relevant.
But at the same time, if you've got fully sustainable fuel in these cars, who cares if you're using a battery?
And the road relevant technology is still covered under the FIA's umbrella.
Right.
You don't need to accomplish all of it in F1.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, Formula E, you look at what Nissan did a few years ago, that's some pretty incredible innovation for hybrid powered engines.
And how relevant is internal combustion at all when the future of consumer cars is electric hydrogen hybrids?
That'd be neat, you think?
I would think that's the way it's going to go in, 40, 50 years.
I think more. We're going to keep finding oil, man. We're just going to keep finding it.
So it seems young drivers have been performing relatively well in this reg set. Do you think there's an element of having to unlearn fewer habits?
There's definitely going to be some of that to a degree, but these guys are the best drivers in the world. I think that's a little bit overblown because learning new braking points and everything, I mean, these guys were doing the super clipping on autopilot practically in Australia when we first saw it. And I don't think that that's necessarily anything to do, or the performance that we've seen from the young drivers has necessarily anything to do with them not having to unlearn old habits. Here's a great dichotomy for you, Isaac and Kimi. Isaac was probably the most impressive rookie last season, and maybe more to do with the car, but not necessarily, because when you compare Suzuka, where they got that car all the way through the race, both of them, Isaac was a second off the pace of Max. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's a lot. And Kimi on the other side, where you've got George, I mean, that's the complete opposite end of the spectrum. So I don't think age has so much to do with it.
Yeah, I don't think so either, especially with Lewis performing so well. There definitely seems to be a disparity in these cars in their current form suiting certain drivers more than others, but I agree, age doesn't seem to be a factor.
And I wonder too how much of that is suiting certain drivers versus just cars being better. With Suzuka, you got groupings in Suzuka of all the different teams straight down the line practically, with the exceptions of arguably two of the top four drivers on the grid in Max and Pierre, way outperforming their teammates. Other than that, it was pretty much just a straight line of teams. I don't know how much of it is really drivers having this reg set suit them, especially when you consider like Max, for example. Like, I mean, I guess it's a bad example because he was going to do good in whatever reg set it was relative to his teammate. Yeah, I don't think the driver suitability to the car has a ton to do with it.
So with the lack of understanding in these new regs, do you think the drivers are further ahead than the engineers?
Definitely not. I think the drivers are behind the engineers. When you look at the data that's accessible to these engineers and the iterations of simulations that they can do and know exactly what the car is going to do with perfect memory of what's already happened and perfect prediction of what's going to happen, you know what I mean, in these simulations, the engineers have access to ways to tell the drivers what they can do to improve, but the drivers are going to have a hard time, especially with an entirely new reg set and an entirely different way to go fast with battery and energy deployment. I think it's going to take time for drivers to figure that out. And I think we're seeing it really quickly from certain drivers, Charles Leclerc.
Kimi,
Yeah, doing a great job of figuring out the energy deployment and doing it better than their teammate. Every time you see the Ferraris battling, it seems like Charles gets the better eventually. Like
Yeah.
it's
he's always got the last bit of juice left.
Yeah, exactly. I think on the whole, the drivers are behind the engineers to this point.
I suppose that's how the teams would want it. Ideally, you'd want everybody on the same level, but it wouldn't be great if your engineers didn't understand things the car was doing that the driver could get out of it. So we've kind of touched on this already, but I'll ask it in a really simple form. Do you think the current regulation set is sustainable?
No, for multiple reasons that we already touched on, so I won't get into it, but Max walking away is a reason that it's not going to be sustainable.
That's a good, simple, big one.
Yep, that's a huge one right there. But also granted, I haven't been around the sport a very long time, but the amount of feedback from the drivers that is very weighted negatively with the FIA.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at Carlos's comments, he said, we've been saying this whole time that this was going to happen and the FIA ignored us. Like, when that's coming from some of your most prominent drivers, hey, like, we've been warning you that this will happen, and it just did.
Oscar made a warning in FP3 at Suzuka about speed difference on the recharge cycles. And then we got the crash in the race.
Yeah.
So the warnings are definitely picking up some legitimacy.
I don't even want to put it out there, but so I'll just leave it at seriously injured. But if a driver is seriously injured as a result of one of these, it's going to look bad. And I can't help but feel that if something major doesn't change, that it's inevitable. It's going to happen. It sucks to say, but I think that's the reality of where we're at with this reg set.
That would be a shame. So if this reg set isn't sustainable, how long do you think it can last? And do you think it will ever find its feet?
I think it will find its feet because I think the FIA, you got to remember, people wearing ties do not often admit that they're wrong. And I think that what will probably happen is we'll see this reg set go on for its duration, 3 years, and then in 2029, it's going to pivot dramatically, and they're going to say it's going to be so much better racing, there's going to be less dirty air, and we're going to have these better engines, and it's going to be faster racing with more passing, and
there's going to be less dirty air, and there's going to be less dirty air.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm learning. I mean, I think they may modify it to a degree. I think something that would be beneficial for them to do maybe for 2027 is to drop from 50-50 more towards 70-30.
That's the big one I've been seeing make the rounds online, is a reduction in that ratio.
Yeah.
Or an adjustment to that ratio, which would absolutely, and that's the tough thing, would absolutely mean slower cars.
Yes.
Formula One would be consciously deciding to make the cars slower, but the racing better.
Better racing, safer racing. Granted, I'm not gonna get up on a pedestal here and tell you that Formula One needs to be, 100% inherently safe. It never will be.
On the opposite side though, you don't need to get up on a soapbox and say that Formula One needs to be the fastest. They're already not.
Are they not in the FIA?
In the FIA, definitely.
Yeah, they're definitely the fastest in the FIA.
But in open wheel racing, IndyCar is definitely faster in terms of top speed.
Isn't that more to do with just track design?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think if you threw a Formula One car in an Indy race,
Ooh, they'd get smoked. Yeah, that'd be terrifying though.
the Indy cars would get smoked.
Yeah.
You mean? Yeah. So I do think they're still the fastest. They're not that far off the pace of last year.
No, they're not, which has been one of the biggest surprises.
Yeah, same. I thought they would be significantly slower.
I thought it would be less than 2 seconds, but more than 1. And it's been like, what, half a second on average?
I'm not entirely sure. I remember seeing something about the top speeds in Bahrain versus this year versus last year, and it being larger than what you're saying there. But I'm sure I haven't looked at it, compared it to the actual races this year versus last year. But I wouldn't be surprised if that is significantly smaller of a gap than we saw in preseason testing, because everybody was trying to kind of hide their cards a little bit more this year than in last year, the end of a reg set.
So obvious one here. Red Bull's having a lot of issues. Do you think their biggest problem is drivability or pace?
Pace, I would say.
Yeah?
Above drivability. They're slower in the straights than the Mercedes. Actually, in Suzuka, we got a pretty good picture of that with Pierre and Max battling. And Max even said, specifically talking about the Alpine, there was nothing that he could have done. He said, maybe I could have gotten past him, but he would have passed me right away. From Max Verstappen's mouth, they don't have the pace, I don't think.
It sounds like they don't have the energy management, and they don't have the drivability for sure. Max has commented about that. But yeah, their outright pace being a top priority is something that we can probably expect from them to look into over the break.
The drivability would specifically be less of a concern to me with Red Bull, because you have Max Verstappen. You can learn more about that pace and figure out the drivability later. If a car's oversteering and throwing that back end around, coming out of a turn, that's just the nature of this reg set a little bit.
Yeah.
They're going to be a little bit more unstable, I should say.
Especially under braking because of the regeneration. Yeah, you just incidentally gave me a little bit of hope for Red Bull's issues here, in that they might stem from a singular issue, because their main problems seem to be drivability and deployment management. And if those are both related to the battery and the rechargeability of it, then perhaps we'll see a big jump from Red Bull over the break.
I see what you're saying, because the drivability would be linked to the battery management, because instability in the car being a result of poor energy management.
Yeah.
Interesting, because of how it harvests.
Exactly, yeah. Thanks for helping me make that into sense.
And like I said, with the drivability, it's less of a concern for me, because obviously when you see the Mercedes come out of a turn, it's glued to the ground and they're just moving. Pretty much everybody else, they're fishtailing and trying to get that car going straight.
It's been amazing what Charles has been able to do with a sliding Ferrari. I've just been flabbergasted by that boy.
Maybe egg on my face for what I said about the suitability not really being a major factor here, but Lewis and Charles have been handling that very well, especially when they take curb coming out of a corner. Actually super random, but coming out of corners, something that Alex was talking about that I've never heard of in Formula One. Three-wheeling? That is a problem.
Eek.
Like, I think Williams' problems, at first we were hoping it was just that they were way overweight, but
This seems a lot more systemic.
yeah, like they just missed across the board. It's bad. There's a lot of people calling for James's head right now in the Williams camps.
Yeah.
I don't think that's
reasonable.
I don't think it's fair either, because they just don't have the systems in place to accomplish the aggressive plans that I think James had for it. And so they ended up with a half-baked version of it.
They probably don't have the personnel to execute all of it either. I mean, how many people's jobs is James doing, relative to other teams?
They're charging like $40 a hat, I think. So I mean, they should have plenty of money. I'm just saying.
But you look at a team like McLaren, and they've got basically 3 guys doing what James Vowles does at Williams.
That's a great point. Even Audi up until very recently had two.
Bandwidth of leadership is definitely stretched pretty far at Williams. Rhetorical question is how impressive has Kimi Antonelli been over these first 3 races? Very impressive.
Yeah, you said rhetorical, so I didn't answer. Sorry.
Oh. So with that performance, is he confirming expectations? Is he exceeding expectations? Or is he maybe even falling short of expectations?
Well, based on our discussions in preseason testing, I can't remember where I had Kimi Antonelli in my drivers' standings rankings. Definitely too low.
Definitely wasn't number 1.
No, it wasn't number 1, but it was higher than you had him, and you were surprised that I had him so high. I think I had him 5th, and you were surprised by it. I think he's blowing expectations out of the water, at least for you and I. Granted, the Mercedes car, but we knew it was going to be really good.
We knew it was going to slap.
We thought it was just going to be George running laps around everybody else. And so part of me wonders, to a certain extent, how much of this is Kimi blowing expectations out of the water or George falling short a little bit.
Or just a difference in operational success between the 2 sides of the garage so far. It's only been 3 races. But we did also have a known large offset in operational performance between the 2 sides of the garage.
Even with like the minor setup change, it's still mind-boggling to me that George couldn't get around the Ferrari.
I mean, I think in a qualifying environment, like we saw, the setup difference existed in qualifying. It was a lot closer than what we saw in the race, and I think that's the difference in dirty air and the susceptibility of the Mercedes setups to that dirty air. I mean, even the optimal setup that Kimi was running, other teams noticed that on the offset pit strategies, when that was in the dirty air, he wasn't performing anywhere near what he was running out front.
Early on in the race at Suzuka, when both Mercedes got passed by 3 to 4 cars each, it seemed pretty quickly to me that George was the one that was weaving through the field more successfully than Kimi at that point. Kimi benefited the most from that Bearman crash. That put him in front in clean air to just run and do Mercedes things. Then George has that weird period in the middle of the lap where he was running like 40, 50 kilometers per hour slower than Charles in that stretch of the lap. So I'm very curious what happened there and if that was ever fixed during the lap with them mashing buttons.
Yeah, I'd actually forgotten that happened, that his car kind of gave up in one corner.
The interesting thing is too, if you look at the telemetry, he was full throttle. He was pushing that pedal the whole way, and then all of a sudden it just dipped.
Yeah.
And then eventually he does let off, but I think that's to try and figure out what's happening. So I'm not sure if they identified and actually fixed that. And that may be the reason that suddenly George, who was weaving through the field in the early parts of the race, suddenly couldn't get around Charles. Regardless of what's happening on George's side, I think what Kimi's been doing can't be called anything other than exceeding expectations.
An exceptional start to a season.
Yeah, for sure. He's the youngest points leader in F1 history.
That's a nice record to have.
That's a nice one to have.
Especially going into a nice long break. That's going to do wonders for his headspace going into Miami.
So we don't need to obviously get into the why we have this break. Skipping Bahrain and Saudi, as we've talked about, presents an opportunity for the teams to develop an accelerated path that they might not have otherwise been able to do. Now, this is obviously just going to be blind predictions here, but I'm curious what you expect to see in Miami.
I expect to see McLaren make a big leap. 4 Mercedes cars out front. I don't think they'll necessarily be Mercedes and McLaren.
You think it could be Alpine?
I think it will be Mercedes, McLaren. I think the order will just be mixed up.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, I follow you now.
I don't know that we'll see that huge a leap from Alpine. I think we'll see some more stability from Red Bull. And I think we might be able to see the first instance of Racing Bulls outperforming Red Bull in both cars. And I think Ferrari's still going to be hanging right in there, but I don't think Miami's going to suit their current car in its current form. I don't know what kind of progress they'll make over the break, but I think given how they look now, they're going to struggle relative to the Mercedes cars when we come back to racing in Miami. That'll affect other Ferrari power units too. You know, Haas might struggle. It's going to be a great race.
What do you expect? You didn't touch on Cadillac, Aston, or Williams. I'm just curious what you expect to see out of the bottom of the grid.
Yeah, Cadillac, I hope to see some good running. You know, hopefully they don't get lapped too bad. Hopefully they can build some more experience on their operational end. I think that's a best case scenario for them. Aston, hopefully they can get both cars around the whole race. Hopefully they have a new team principal. Hopefully a lot of things. They're in rough shape. And then what was the third team I skipped over? Williams. This opportunity that the rest of the teams have is a necessary chance for Williams to seize. And if they get anything wrong, their season is pretty much done for.
Cooked.
Whatever steps they take over this break need to be correct more than they need to be large.
It's disheartening that that's where it's at. But at least between those three teams, there is still as sizable of a gap as you could really have. So I'm encouraged a little bit, not really a ton, but a little bit, that we're not racing with Cadillac per se. Granted, I know Alex finished behind some Cadillacs, but he took like 6 pit stops or something in Suzuka.
Yeah.
So it was a test. It wasn't a race.
Yeah, we're still early enough in this reg set that the bottom teams are running tests during races.
They've literally done that in every single race with both cars, except when Carlos got P9. That's the only time that they were actually truly
Williams has been testing in races. Aston has been testing with both cars in races. Has Cadillac done? They did some in-race testing with Checo.
They did with Valtteri too, because at the start of the race, I'm pretty sure every single driver was on mediums except Valtteri.
Right.
He was on hards. What I'm expecting to see continued Mercedes dominance, not improved Mercedes dominance. I still think they're going to be right where they're at right now, in line with everybody else with their upgrades. I agree. I think McLaren's going to take a jump. I don't know if this is just like Ferrari hate embedded within me for no reason at all. And it goes back to the power unit issue. I think that whatever Ferrari hit the head of on the nail to this point,
it wasn't top speed.
It wasn't top speed, and it wasn't deployment and energy recovery. It's the aerodynamics of the car and acceleration. That's why they're doing well in cornering. And I don't see those advantages carrying forward in the way that having a significantly better power unit is going to carry you forward.
Yeah, I think especially looking specifically at Miami, I just look at the Ferrari deployment and that long uphill straight. How much power are they going to have to sacrifice to stay competitive on that straight? And at the end of it, how much is that going to compromise the rest of their lap?
Yeah, because they're going to have to use a lot of battery to keep up on that straight, and then they're just not going to have it available to them in the rest of the lap.
It plays into their favor that the section leading up to that is very twisty, so they can do a lot of harvesting before that, but that means they're not going to be deploying at all.
After that.
Well, they won't be deploying at all before that or after that.
Yeah, it's going to be... I'm curious how the FIA is going to handle like the megajoule recovery and deployment, kind of like they did in Suzuka.
I haven't checked what it's supposed to be for Miami, and I don't think that it would be particularly pertinent to know.
I don't think it's established probably yet.
I think they had it outlined for all of the races.
I bet it'll change.
Probably.
Just after what happened with Suzuka and the pressure on the FIA.
They've got to slow the cars down.
Or speed them up. Speed up the harvesting mode.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I don't know what they can do, honestly, at this point, because the cars are so already designed and developed. Like, what do you do? But sorry, that's tangential. The team that I think is actually going to make the biggest leap is Alpine. So in my preseason, I actually had Alpine in dead last. I thought they were just gonna hit the bottom of the barrel again, and I was so wrong. And Alpine, specifically with Pierre, I think you're going to start seeing Alpine as the clear number four team. I don't see a Red Bull powertrain leading the midfield, Alpine having a Mercedes under the hood, if you will, behind the car, is going to be such a huge advantage if they can really nail the rest of their package. Because who are they competing with? They're competing with Audi, developing their own engine for their first season. Haas and a Ferrari, which we just went over, that advantage that they have right now is probably going to wane, and the advantage of a more powerful unit is probably going to increase throughout the season. That's pretty much it. Because then you got the two Red Bull teams and Haas with the Ferrari, and it's Alpine. I think Alpine is the clear winner of this break in the midfield.
That's reasonable. In terms of literal improvement, that's a sound guess. I think the easy guess is the on paper improvement of McLaren, because they've had such lousy luck going into the break.
Yeah, whatever
of course
happens,
they're going to do better.
Yeah, they're going to do better. But Oscar very well could have won Suzuka if it weren't for the Ollie Bearman crash there. So
I think he could have.
I think he could have. Do I think he would have? I'm not so sure. I think Kimi would have had the juice to get by him. Because remember, George had an issue with his setup, and George had an issue with his power.
Yeah, it would have
Kimi
been.
didn't have.
It would have been a Kimi versus Oscar race, and I think it could have been a fantastic one.
George will tell you that he would have won if it weren't for that yellow. But I think George is probably P3 instead of P4.
Yeah, I think George's issues are exactly why Oscar could have won that.
And then at the bottom of the grid, I have no idea what to expect out of Aston.
I'm almost hoping BYD gets in mid-season. Chinese team. Woo! Guan Yu Zhou. Woo! Because, let's be honest. Max isn't the only driver who's got to be looking at retiring right now.
Or taking a sabbatical.
I don't think Fernando's taking another sabbatical.
Yeah, but I don't think Max is retiring.
Oh no, but okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
I think we could be looking at a struggle large enough to push Fernando all the way out, at least of the driver's seat.
But isn't Joe the reserve driver for Cadillac?
Yeah.
If he gets the opportunity, he can obviously leave.
Yeah, and drivers don't count towards the cost cap, so.
You sure about that? I think it's your top 3 paid people, regardless of whether or not they're a driver or a TP or an engineer, count towards the cost cap.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the top 3 thing. Driver salaries don't count towards the cost cap.
Period?
I'm pretty sure period.
I thought your top 3 paid people counted. I might be wrong. We'll look it up and put a graphic here saying which one of us is wrong. Me? Wait, which side would you be on? That one. Me or him? Anyway. Yeah, lastly, Williams. I'm so hopeful that they come back. James seems to think we can reduce a lot of weight for Miami. Miami has been what we've been saying since Australia would be the opportunity to make our most significant upgrades. So, like you said, it doesn't need to be a monumental improvement. It just needs to be an improvement. And if it's not, the season is cooked. So,
yeah.
God, I hope it works. Or Carlos is leaving. There's no way Carlos sticks around.
Where does he go?
Wherever a seat opens up.
So what seats do open next year?
Franco's will open up.
That's a tough.
He's not going to go to the Red Bull Junior. Ooh.
The Red Bull Junior team might not be the Red Bull Junior team next year.
Red Bull, if Max leaves.
Oh, wow, yeah. That could be.
That's the no-brainer seat.
Yeah. That's tough though, because Red Bull has got to be eager to get the Arvid and Isaac head-to-head kicked off. Like that pairing is going to be one of the best teammate battles in.
But if they have the opportunity to get Carlos in that seat instead of Arvid, they'll take it. It's not Helmut and Christian in charge anymore. You know what I mean?
No, it's not, but
I think Mekis would take Carlos over Arvid.
That's a tough one.
I don't think so.
That is a tough one.
But also, I do think there's probably a chance he goes to Audi.
Yeah, Nico's pretty old.
Yeah, I don't know what Nico's contract situation looks like. But,
He's there through 27, I think.
oh, okay. So probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what seats would be available to him. Hopefully, we don't have to find out because
Alex would stay.
Yeah, he would. I think he's
Pretty stuck.
pretty stuck. And honestly, with the way he's been talking to the team on the radio that keeps getting on the broadcast,
Yeah.
oh, it must be my driving style that sucks. Like, and it's like, dude, like, we get it. The car stinks. Like, don't be laying into the engineers. Everybody's mad that this sucks.
Yeah.
Not just you, dude.
Nobody's going out of their way to make your experience in the car worse than it has to be. Don't go out of your way to make their experience back at the factory worse than it has to be.
Exactly. And he's making no effort to mitigate that.
Yep.
It's tough.
So we've found some pretty, I don't want to say complex narratives, but niche narratives in these first three races. As far as the simple narrative goes of Mercedes dominance, Ferrari hunting them down, do you think fans are being misled?
In what way? Like by
the early season narrative that's...
versus how it's going to play out for the duration of the season?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. The casual fan is definitely being misled, but I think most people understand at this point that McLaren is probably going to make moves that will challenge Ferrari, and there are a lot of, 19 races left for them to make those moves.
That's literally a whole season.
It's a whole season. So whatever advantage Ferrari's established over the first three races from a points perspective, there's plenty of time for that to erode. All it takes is one Ferrari DNF to really level the playing field. Maybe not exactly on a points perspective, especially since Ferrari has finished on the podium all three races.
But on a momentum end, that would be significant for McLaren, especially given that their disadvantage so far has been largely due to DNFs.
Reliability, yeah. Yeah, true. DNFs is a better way to put it because Oscar putting it in the wall was not a car issue. So one thing that I think is going to be is kind of the compelling story of the season that hasn't shown its face yet is George versus Kimi. One thing that this reg set has done is on one side, we're saying, ugh, Mercedes dominance. Like, I really just hope that other teams can get in the mix. But then in Suzuka, I found myself being like, get out of the way, Charles and Oscar. I want to see Russell and Kimi go at it head to head. And it's just such a weird, polarizing, dichotomy of this because you want there to be more parity for the sake of entertainment. But at the same time, it's looking like a foregone conclusion that it's going to be a Mercedes title, which I do want to loop back to. But when do you think we will see the actual, like we saw with Lewis and Charles, the actual racing between Kimi and George?
I think we're going to see it right out of the gate after the break. I think this break that's giving the other teams a chance to catch up a little bit is going to give Mercedes the chance to get ahead. Less so get ahead, more so get consistent. And they're not going to have the operational issues on hopefully either side of the garage that we've seen a little bit of. I think we're going to see some good wheel-to-wheel racing between George and Kimi right after this break. Maybe not a 1-2.
Follow-up question to that. We see most teams, Mercedes especially historically, choosing a number one driver. Do we see that this season? Or does Toto let them duke it out?
So that's really tough. Generally, Mercedes has had a big difference, we'll say, in their drivers. No shade to Valtteri, but when it came to decisions against Lewis, that was an easy call for the team every time. George should have that same seniority, but Kimi's got a lot of favoritism, especially from the man in the seat upstairs. Yeah, Toto loves that kid. And I can absolutely see Toto using a 9-point lead in the championship to justify giving Kimi priority. But I think at the end of the day, Mercedes is just going to play it by the book and give the driver in front on track the strategy advantage in the race.
For now, but at what point does it become a situation where they decide on a number one driver? For example, if Russell and Kimi duke it out on the track and Kimi comes out ahead and extends that lead to a 16-point lead, does that become a situation where,
It would be dynamic. It would depend on the number of races left in the season. I don't see Mercedes picking someone based on points as long as that differential is less than 30.
Who do you think is going to establish a 30-point lead, or will somebody establish a 30-point lead between the two drivers? Or are they going to be duking it out all season?
I hope we see them duke it out all season. That's definitely the idea. It's good for Mercedes if that's how it goes. It's better for Formula One if that's how it goes. And it's best for us if that's how it goes.
Is that how you think it will go?
I hope so, yeah.
You hope so, but is it how you think it will go?
I guess in reality, I hope Oscar pulls up in there. But no, I think that is how it'll go. I think we're going to have a nice, surprising battle. Maybe not surprising to you, but surprising to me and maybe some other fans between Kimi and George.
One of the things that I was going to follow this up with was, is McLaren a title threat?
Absolutely.
So if McLaren, see this all links together. If McLaren is truly a title threat, then that makes it even more important that Mercedes start to make a decision on their drivers at some point, because you can't have them battling wheel to wheel.
Yeah. So
if there is a real title threat behind them.
It's really critical for George to be the chosen one this year for Mercedes. Looking ahead at the sport, I'm still uncertain where Isaac Hadjar and Arvid Lindblad are going to fit in the larger scope of Formula One moving into the 2030s. But we are heading into an era that should be more or less defined by Kimi Antonelli versus Oscar Piastri, with Arvid and Isaac in there somewhere.
No Lando?
I don't think Lando can hold a candle to Oscar. I think last year was his last chance to beat Oscar. He barely pulled it out. I think this year is George's last chance to beat either Oscar or Kimi.
I don't think that's the case. I think George is going to be in contention for a few years here. I think any one of those four could win the title in 2027.
Yeah.
Lando could do it again.
I think Oscar's got the better chances. And then with the Mercedes too, I think it's closer. Than between the McLarens.
Oscar's got to figure out street circuits.
Yeah, Oscar's definitely got to figure out the street circuits.
Most of the end of the season.
Well, you look at what he needed to work on at the end of 2 seasons ago, and he came back last season having more than worked on his race starts. There were a couple other things. Kid crushed his weak spots. So I think looking ahead to the next off season, we can cross our fingers, maybe do a little more than cross our fingers, in expectations that Oscar's going to address those needs.
Any closing remarks before we head into Miami?
I really like your take about Haas and Alpine being the two developing teams to watch. And I especially like those two because they're traditionally their best source of performance gains have been in aerodynamics, both of them. And with the different power units, it'll be cool to see how that ability plays out.
From my understanding, Haas put a lot of their resources into their suspension and tire deg, which I'm very curious to see how that plays out at other tracks, because you would have thought Suzuka would have been one that you'd start to see that kind of an advantage, but I just don't think we got the opportunity to see it.
A lot of that's down to the tire selections. It seems like with the new cars, they also need to, and new tires, they need to revisit some of the tire ranges they're picking for certain race weekends because we didn't
They're in the hardest 3 for Suzuka.
Yeah, and we still didn't get that, well, I say still, I think they could have gone one softer because we didn't quite get that malleability in the strategy where you want to be
a clear one-stop race.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to be right on that cusp between a 2-stop being able to work.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's when you have a more dynamic and fun race, is if a 2-stop can still work.
And we'll get there as data grows.
Yeah, for sure. As a whole, I think the racing has been fun to watch. I will say, as much as I hate on this reg set, I have been pleasantly entertained in a few of the races. Well, it's really just up until Suzuka, I was actually feeling much more positive about this reg set than I anticipated. So hopefully they can find a way to thread the needle to make the racing, look a little bit more like it did in Shanghai.
Yeah, Suzuka was a little bit of a blow to that.
Yeah, that was very disappointing and alarming in other ways. But I think it's still been an entertaining start to the season, and really excited to see who makes the next steps in Miami.
Yeah, I think this early season break is a really unique opportunity.
Yeah.
And I think one of the coolest things about it is we don't know, with these new cars, we have no idea which teams these two races were going to benefit.
One thing that we kind of hit on that I just now realized may not be entirely true. So we have this long gap between round 3 and now what is going to be round 4 in Miami. But then immediately following that is another long break that was already programmed into the schedule. So I don't know, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 weeks, but I don't know that it's necessarily all hinging on what happens in Miami, because teams might have a few different ideas to try out, and they can kind of, obviously, best case scenario, you put all your resources into one basket and it works. But I think you're more likely to see that at the bottom because they have the most to gain and the least to lose. So I think it's possible that in Miami you see a team like Williams or Cadillac, or not Aston, but yeah, Williams or Cadillac make a big jump than it is you see it at the top, because they're probably going to diversify their resources a little bit more.
I think come the race in Miami too, those lower teams are going to diversify their strategies more. I think they'll be keen to split the strategy across their cars.
Between either side of the garage.
Yeah, that is if they're not picking one car to continue running tests with. Like you pointed out, we're going to have another big break, so it might behoove the lower teams to just keep on doing in-race testes. In-race testes.
In-race testes. I think we're still going to see a bit of that, and I think those decisions are definitely made in mid-race, because I don't think even a team like Williams is going to, throw the race out the window until it becomes a very clear indication that you're not going to score points.
Yeah, because even 1 point, you got to go get it.
You got to go get it. And that's exactly what happened in China. I don't think they expected that, but there was enough retirements and enough luck off the start Carlos moved way ahead. I could talk about Carlos and Williams way too much, so I'll stop it there. But I'll be hesitant to put too much weight on Miami, despite what I may have already said in this very podcast. I think between Miami and I think it's Canada after that, between rounds 4 and 5, I think we will see a little bit more of the shakeout between the two of them in terms of what we're going to see going forward. But I don't think it all necessarily hinges on Miami. So I did just kind of want to get that tidbit in there because that just popped in the old noggin. This is fun, dude. Thanks for doing this.
Good hang, man.
Yeah, good hang. Yeah, thanks for tuning in. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Interact with this video any way you can. If you made it this far, helps get us in front of other people too and helps grow the channel. So appreciate you watching this far if you made it this far. And we'll see you after Miami. Or maybe if we're so inclined, a little bit before Miami.
See you soon.